and in Xcode, and you see all of this, and you're wondering, what do each of these do? And you start looking into them, and they just get really confusing. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to explain every single one of these words, with main and sum and scene and app and all that. But I want to save myself and you some time, so I actually got a timer, and I'm going to time myself so that I am limited to talking about each one of them for 1 minute, and let's see how far I can go. And I hope that you have the why behind why this stuff exists. You might not know exactly how to use it and you know how to implement it, but you can Google that. What is hard to Google is the why behind it, the context behind it. So I'm going to start the timer, and we're going to talk about import. Why do we have import? So let's take a look at something like this. So you have your app right here, and your app talks to the operating system. And the operating system is this like purplish, bluish stuff. The operating system controls some database thing. There's a framework for the audio engine, and so on. Well, in order to use these, the functions that are built into this, and the classes and the structs that are built into this, you have to import them. And that's what import is. Now, when you're building your app, you're using SwiftUI. Your SwiftUI is actually one of these things that, that you can download. Wow, my computer is very slow. SwiftUI is one of these things. And SwiftUI is like super complicated because it can handle touch targets, and it can handle buttons and colors and all of that. But that's why you are importing SwiftUI. That's 1 minute. All right, let's start another one. Let's talk about main. Main is something like this. You have an app, you know, your competitor has an app, and then here's a completely different app. And I'm going to give them all colors because it's probably easier for you guys to see colors. And then this is the operating system right here. I kind of wish I did the colors appropriately. So this is the operating system right here. Whenever the user touches your app's icon, the operating system needs to know where your app begins. And the operating system kind of like points to that line of code and says, okay, this is where you're going to start, and then starts executing every single line after that. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but basically that's what it is. And each app needs to have one location that you need to point to. That the operating system needs to point to. Otherwise, when the user taps your app icon, the operating system doesn't know what to do. You know, oh shit, oh that was a minute. Do we start here, or do we start, you know, on this line? I don't know. So that's what the @main is for. All right, let's talk about structs in 1 minute. This one's going to be a tough one. So when you are making apps, let's say there's this green object right here, and in this green object there is some variable that can be changed. Maybe it's an integer, right? Equals 6. Syntax is, I'm throwing it out the window right now because of time purposes. And then there's some function, func foo, that uses that var 6, var the number 6 right here, num. Okay, so there's this function that uses num. Well, if you are, God, the syntax is messed up. I'm sorry, guys. All right, that's a little bit better. Fuck, I failed. There's like 9 seconds left. I might have to go over time with this one. I am so sorry. I have to go over time. If another object relies on this object, I'm going to make it right now. Let's make it this, sure, this pinkish one. And it says, okay, I'm going to run the foo function right here. Well, the foo function requires this num. But what if in the middle of the execution, some other object that you created or another engineer created, and you just don't know about, they were actually using the green object at the same time, and they modified num. And then there's ... there's more code over here. And they also modified num. then you expected this guy on the left expected num to be 6 with the operation that they're doing, but this guy modified it in between. And so now you're the developer of this and you're looking at it and you're going, wait a minute, that's not the answer that I expected. And that's because this thing changed the state of this object. Swift and Apple try to get around this by creating something called a struct, where a copy of this is created, and now instead of the left and the right pink one both looking at the same object, they are both looking at different objects. So the right can modify num all they want, and it does not affect the num on this side. Now, that's what it does. Let's say why. This is because if you're working on really large code bases with lots of different changes and lots of people working on objects that you have no control over, then this stuff gets really confusing. Another time that it gets confusing is if you have multi-threaded types of applications. So you have multiple processor threads that are working on this same object, and they're also changing things at the same time. So that's why we have struct, because it makes copies. You can still use classes, but and then there's a whole bunch of other reasons between structs and classes. I might have been way too over-optimistic that I could talk about it in 1 minute, but let's start another minute for app. App, I'm going to cheat right here, and I'm going to look at my notes because I have notes right here. All right, so your app actually controls scenes. I know, it's weird, right? Like we have this app and it controls scenes. Let's do, where is the documentation? Here's the documentation for app. Here we are. And by the way, I highly suggest that if you just don't know anything, just start reading your documentation. Pretty much the app is where main is located, and I typically look at this stuff. So it's not very useful. Really, it's where main is located, and it's where your scenes are located. And also, if you have a completely different architecture where maybe you want your app to spin up the model architecture or spin up different parts of your app so that they are ready when you need them. I am not happy with my explanation for app. But let's move on to whatever the next one is. This one. All right. Var body. So let's talk about var for another minute as well. There's a var and let. Var you can change it. Let it's constant. So why do we need this? Why don't we just use var everywhere? My best guess, I didn't actually look in too deeply into this one. My best guess is if you're a developer working with other people as well, and you see the word var over here, you know that it can be changed. Like something somewhere down the line will change this variable. So for example, if I have a var num, which is int equals 6. Because I said var, I know that I cannot always trust that this is 6. Something somewhere could change this into a completely different number. Whereas if it was let, I know for sure that it cannot be changed, and I will code a little bit differently. Maybe I'll code less defensively if I know that it's a let. So that's one potential reason. Sum. Okay, this one was a little bit. I'm going to start the timer so I don't go over. This one's a little bit more complicated. Here's my take on it. Whenever you create this gets into protocol, because now I have to explain protocols. Let's say that you have some protocol over here, and you have a class that uses this protocol, and some function somewhere will return this protocol that we're looking at. You can actually, if you don't use the word sum over here, and you say, hey, this class conforms to the scene protocol, then whoever is looking at body can actually figure out what the underlying object is or instance is of this protocol. And sometimes you don't want them to know that, because maybe if they know the underlying instance of it, they can mess around with that instance. They can call functions that they were not supposed to. They might be able to change things that they're not supposed to. So that's the 1 minute explanation of this. Oh, and why is sum necessary? Because when you put the word sum in front of it, the only thing guaranteed that anybody using this class will know is the protocol. They will not know the underlying class. You will know the underlying class when you're a developer because you have all the information here. But let's say you publish a library and people are gonna call your class in your library. You don't want them to know the underlying class. This is to protect the other people and to protect the state of your app. Next one is scene. And I guess I think I'm gonna have to cheat onto this one because I took notes on scene. So a scene is a container for your views. So app was a container for the scenes, and now you have a scene that's a container for your view, and also the state of or whatever state the views that the scene contains needs. Yeah, there are a few. This is the interesting thing about scenes that I found was there are different types of scenes, which is Windowgroup, and then there were like 2 more, like settings and something else. You could create your own custom scene. You could the way I want to think about it is it's like the root view in the old way of doing things with UIKit. And I am out of time, and I am also disappointed that I could not explain this complex thing in about 1 minute. Let's move on to Windowgroup. All right. The best reason I can think that we need Windowgroup is when you actually create your app on the Mac, the Windowgroup, you can think of it as this window that you're looking at in Xcode. And all of these default things that come with Window, like minimize, zoom, and so on, that comes for free if you use the Windowgroup scene. Same thing for iPad. On the iPad side of things, if you create 2 instances of the app, when you split the iPad in half and then you have 2 instances running, this is what Windowgroup will help with as well. So it's not quite useful. I haven't found like a really good reason for it in iOS, and yeah, that's that. Content view. At the last minute, content view, you could have named it anything that you want because it just refers to this content view. So this is the actual view that you want. Yeah, I was hoping that I would have a much better explanation of this stuff in 1 minute or less, and it seems like I actually need more time and I need to actually rehearse what I'm going to talk about. But I'm still going to release this video because it might be useful for you. And also, I don't think I'm actually going to go into detail reading out all of these notes that I made on views and apps and scenes. So I don't know where to go from here, but I'm going to release this anyway. Fuck it. See ya.